As the James Bond movies came out in the 1960s, people have been interested in spies. If this camera was used by a real secret agent, it could be worth a lot of money to the right collector. Corey Harrison just crashed his motorcycle and had to jump off at 40 mph to avoid something much worse. In that split second, his whole world turned upside down as he hit the ground with such force. What was he trying to avoid, and why did no one see the real danger coming? Join us as we uncover the secrets. The truth about this event proved that someone tried to kill him. Pawn Stars was just the start for Corey. He was raised in a pawn shop. His legendary grandfather Richard Harrison opened the gold and silver pawn shop in Las Vegas in the early 1980s, and his father Rick Harrison turned it into an empire. Corey started working in the business as a child and learned the ropes. By the time Pawn Stars came out on TV in 2009, he was already well established and knew how to make deals. Life outside of the shop wasn't as smooth as he made it look on screen. Before we go any further, it's clear that Corey's life was much more chaotic than anyone thought, and what happened next would shake him in ways that no one saw coming. There were constant fights behind the scenes. Family business always brings tension, and he wasn't just an employee. His father wasn't too keen on handing over control and things. He fought for his share and eventually got a small piece of the business. Second, someone engraved something in there and then took it out for me to buy something and say, "Serial number removed," and the fact that you're not Bill McCord's name on it. Those are the three biggest red flags I can put into my computer system. It wasn't exactly the victory he wanted, but it was something. That was just the beginning of his physical problems. He was also having a lot of trouble. He had always been overweight, and at one point he weighed over 400 pounds. Doctors told him he needed to make a change because he was at risk for diabetes, so he had weight loss surgery, lost half of his weight, and looked like a new man. But just as things were looking up, tragedy struck. He was riding his motorcycle through Las Vegas on what should have been a normal day, but something went horribly wrong. He lost control while going too fast, and instead of preparing for impact, he jumped off a moving motorcycle while knowing he might not be able to get back up. Somehow he survived, but his hand was badly damaged and needed surgery with 8 screws and 2 metal plates holding it together. In typical fashion, he didn't even go to the hospital right away. He went back to his own birthday party first. But his problems didn't end there. In 2023, he was pulled over in Las Vegas because police said he was swerving all over the road and smelled like alcohol. Isn't a very valuable camera, but it's unique enough that a photography collector would probably really like to have it. How much do you want for it? He said he had only had 1 drink 7 hours before, but the police didn't believe him. He failed the sobriety test, was arrested, and had to give a blood sample. When the results came back, they showed he was over the legal limit. He wasn't happy and he planned to fight the charges, but his reputation was already hurt. Sadly, his younger brother Adam Harrison died of an overdose in 2024. He wasn't famous like him, but he had worked at the pawn shop before becoming a plumber. Adam's death left the family devastated, and he shared his grief in emotional posts that made it clear how much he loved and missed Adam. Losing a sibling changes a person, and this was different from the weight loss, accident, and legal mess he had been through before. Compared to losing Adam, he had always been a fighter. But this was something no one could have imagined. He had to keep going, running the shop and going on the show, trying to push through the pain, but those close to him could see it. This loss hurt more than anything else he had ever experienced in his life. His first marriage to his high school sweetheart, Charlene, ended in 2015, and he then married Karina, also known as Kiki, in 2017. It seemed like a new start, but by 2018, they got divorced, but they stayed friendly and even had a son together. They named him Richard Benjamin Harrison, after his grandfather. Fans began to wonder if they were back together when he posted a picture of himself kissing someone who looked a lot like Karina. He never confirmed anything, so everyone was left guessing. No matter what happened, he always had the pawn shop, but working there had its own problems and lessons. Corey's first big deal went horribly wrong. Despite everything, he has stayed committed to the pawn shop. He started working there as a kid doing the dirty jobs no one else wanted. Over time, he learned the business, became an expert at spotting valuable items, and earned his place in the shop. He may not always agree with his father, but he has put in the work, and through all of life's ups and downs, the shop has been there for him. He was a teenager and thought he was making a good deal when he traded 5 roll watches for a... If you carried one of these, you were serious about business. He thinks it's worth a lot of money, but no deal is made until an expert says it's real, but not exactly a one-of-a-kind treasure. It's worth between $6,000 and $8,000 at auction, which means the offer was too low. The seller wanted $7,000 and the counteroffer was $4,000. After a tense round of haggling, they settled on $4,500. Another deal was made, and a Western artifact was added to the collection. As soon as things started to calm down, a man walked in with a vintage Rolex Submariner, saying it was made in the early 1960s. It looked good, but the shop had been robbed before. A watch expert took a long, careful look and found that this wasn't just any old Rolex. It had rare features that collectors would fight over. The seller wants $12,000. The first offer was $8,000, and after a lot of haggling, they agreed on $10,000. This watch can be sold for a good profit, and the seller gets paid well. But then things get really interesting. A medieval knight's helmet, supposedly from the 1500s, is put on the counter. The seller swears it belonged to a noble warrior, but no deal is made until proof is shown. Medieval armor is one of the most fake collectibles in the game, so an expert checks the metal and says it is real and it's worth between $15,000 and $20,000 at auction. The seller wants $16,000 and the offer is $9,000. After a lot of haggling, they settle on $11,000 for the artifact, adding it to the growing treasure trove. Some trades aren't just about money. They turn into full-on high-stakes battles where history, passion, and strategy collide. For example, a man came in with a Vatican-licensed Michelangelo Madonna bust and thought he had struck gold. He wanted $80,000 for it, but an expert came in and confirmed that it was only a cast of the original masterpiece. There was a huge difference between what the shop was willing to pay and what the seller wanted. The shop offered $23,000 in cash, but the seller wasn't interested. Then it got interesting. The guy wanted to trade for $100 of silver instead of cash. With the price of silver at the time, this trade was worth $24,000. That's some next-level haggling. The Michelangelo bust left the store and a pile of silver took its place. Some people come into pawn shops hoping to get rich, but not everyone does. A man walked into the shop with what looked like another casino chip, but it wasn't. This little piece of plastic came from an old Las Vegas club, and only 8 were known to exist. Collectors would go crazy for it. The owner wanted $6,000, but let's be honest, he was dreaming. The shop countered with $3,000, and the guy didn't like it, so he went for a trade. Their eyes locked, and the deal went through. A set of rat-packed statues of Frank Sinatra, Sammy Davis Jr., and Dean Martin. The shop had them listed for $600, but they were actually worth a lot less. After some haggling, they agreed on $33,000 in cash plus the statues. The guy left, probably going straight to a casino to try to win even more money. Next, a man came in carrying an old harmonica. It wasn't just any harmonica, it had a Zeppelin design from the early 1900s. At that time, airships were seen as the way of the future, and this tiny instrument that engraving made the harmonica worth a lot more than its face value of $10 or $20. The shop made an offer of $200, and the guy wanted more, but let's be honest, there wasn't much room to negotiate. He pushed for $300, but the shop refused. The deal was $200 for a Timex watch, not a Rolex, but hey, and then there was the guy who literally dug treasure out of the trash. He found an old Louis Marx and Company tin toy in a dumpster, cleaned it up, and he thought he had found gold. The toy still worked, the little car could go around the track, and the box was in pretty good shape. He asked for $200. The shop wasn't as excited. They knew these toys were cool, but unless they were in perfect condition, they wouldn't bring in a lot of money. They countered with $40, and the guy tried to go higher, but they wouldn't budge. The deal was $40 in cash and $20 in store credit. Not a jackpot, but for something that was pulled out of the hat. The surprises didn't stop there. Someone walked in with a bright red Coca-Cola vending machine from the 1950S that screamed nostalgia. Even better, it still had all of its original parts and kept sodas cold. Chum and I bought an old Coca-Cola machine from the 1930S, and now we're on our way to see Rickdale to see if it's even worth restoring. The seller wanted $4,000, and the shop liked it, but they had to be realistic, so they countered with $2,500. The seller hesitated, but eventually agreed to the deal. It was a fair trade for a piece of Americana. A rare Rolling Stones concert poster from the 1970S was also included. These are collectible, especially if they are in perfect condition and come from major tours. The seller wanted $8,000, saying it was one of only a few ever printed. An expert was called in to confirm it was real and give an estimate of $5,000. Talks got heated, but they eventually settled on $4,500, which was a win for everyone. One seller came in with a lot of money and a 1920S baseball glove with a famous player's faint signature on the inside. The seller wanted $3,000, hoping for a big payday, but sports memorabilia can be tricky. An expert confirmed it was real, but the faded signature made it worth less. The final price was $1,700, which wasn't a grand slam, but was still a good score. There was also a custom-built pinball machine from the 1980S. The seller spent years fixing it up and making sure it worked perfectly. It had custom artwork, limited production, and all the original parts. Classic arcade games with flashing lights and sounds that made them cult favorites. He wanted to sell it for $7,000, but the shop wasn't sure. A specialist looked it over and said it was worth about $4,000. After a lot of haggling, they settled on $3,800, which isn't bad for an arcade classic. What do you think? Don't forget to like and subscribe for more.